I don't know if you've ever tried to read Kant for content instead of as classwork. Read it like a work of philosophical literature. But I couldn't make it halfway through because he just threw me off using terms in ways that completely contradicted what I had up to then learned about consciousness, mind, and the brain. The most egregious example is the way he uses the term intuition to mean any kind of object of consciousness, whether it be thoughts or ideas or concepts or insights, inspiration, understanding, or wit. Oh, all of it was lumped together in this big pot. And with what we understand now about mind and brain, which they didn't have any inkling of at the beginning of the age of reason, we know that these are actually separate categories of objects of consciousness. And what this led me to was a structural and functional analysis of mind, brain, and consciousness. Where are they distinct? What goes in each category? Okay? So, what I came up with was a functional and structural analysis of mind, brain, and consciousness by separating out each from the other. What started me on this was reading Hannah Arendt's Life of the Mind. And in the Life of the Mind, she's talking about the functions of what we refer to as mind, as thinking, willing, and choosing. Her fourth category, her fourth subject was going to be judging. But I'm going to set that to the side because she never really finished that. She never delivered that lecture. So it didn't make it into the book. I think it's a different category. But the functions of mind, thinking, willing, and choosing, operate independently even though they are all interrelated. If you see what I mean. That's why you can't talk yourself into new behaviors, as AA is so fond of telling us. It's true, because you can't. Because those functions of mind operate independently. All right? And so I decided to try and separate out mind and brain after realizing that consciousness is energy. And as such, consciousness is the energy of awareness itself. When my philosophical question that at the very beginning of all this was, what if Leibniz was right? In the 17th century, Leibniz in Germany and Newton in England are battling over who actually created the calculus, the system of working with numbers that we now refer to as the calculus, or actually probably more like trig, but that's beside the point. Obviously, Newton won. And with Newton's, and the deeper issue that they were fighting about was, what is the focus of philosophy? Is the focus of philosophy to be reason and a rational analysis of the world we live in? Or is the focus of philosophy going to be consciousness? Consciousness lost. Leibniz lost. But what if essentially Leibniz's idea of consciousness as the basis of everything that we know was more correct than reason as the basis for everything that we know? Reason is a system of thought. that is used by the mind to analyze and understand, to gain knowledge. Consciousness is the energy of awareness itself. So what I did was, like Hegel and Marx, turned philosophy on its head, made pragmatism the basis of philosophical thought, put means as superior to ends. What I'm doing is turning philosophy inside out. Reason is a part of consciousness. Consciousness is not part of reason. And this has been the problem in our dominantly rational civilization as we have developed it since the time of Newton. But what if Leibniz is right? What if consciousness is the essential factor of existence? In the Bible, Pontius Pilate, well, certainly in the musical Jesus Christ Superstar, I think it's Pontius Pilate, asks Christ, "What is truth? Is mine the same as yours?" And my answer has become no. Experience is individual for reasons I can actually explain, and will as I get down to it. But truth is experience. And so your experience is not the same as mine, so therefore your truth is not the same as mine. We can stand on common truths and have common experiences, but even so, our experiences are not the same. Our truths are not the same. Okay? That's one of the questions that I want to explore by doing this functional and structural analysis of mind, brain, and consciousness. So now, consciousness is the energy of awareness. What is the mind? John Bogosian Arden, in his work, at one point describes mind as a field of information generated by the activity, the bioelectrical mechanical energy generated by the activity of the crossover between the right and left hemisphere through the corpus callosum. So it's like a Van de Graaff generator. You have the core in the center that generates the field. Then you have the globe that contains the field. But the field is not entirely contained by the globe, because your hair stands up when you put your finger on or near the globe. It extends out into the universe. Much the way our individual consciousness, while contained within the locus of the mind, that is centered in the brain, but is not the brain, reaches out, has access, and has effect outside of itself. Just like the electrical field generated can create static in a whole room if it's contained. The mind extends beyond the physical definition of the head, of the brain, of the skull. All right, yes, of the definition of these things. Okay, so it's really a virtual locus for consciousness to exist and interact in the outside world that reason is so preoccupied in understanding. Okay? Now, what's interesting is because of this locus of the field of information. The mind itself, it would seem, is structurally defined by the brain. This is where it gets interesting and tricky. Okay, so the brain has two hemispheres, and we have mapped much of the brain functioning. We know about the left brain being dominantly rational, and the right brain being dominantly something else. This is where I had my problem with Kant. Because intuition that operates in the right hemisphere of the brain is operationally different from reason, which is dominant in the left part of the brain and in society in general. Suppose that reason, if we think of reason as the operating system of the left brain, it operates on a rational basis. The right brain operates on an intuitive basis, an associative that is, centered on associations rather than rational linear thought. And so associations are global. Associations aren't limited to time and space in that way, or are not linearly associated. But they're legitimate just the same, and they contribute to our understanding and add to our knowledge on the rational side. That is part of the activity. That is part of the transcribing and translation and transmission between the hemispheres of the brain. Okay?